Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo's second chapter just dropped, and that's actually pretty good. We've got new information, next level aura farming, and oh yeah, the new biggest glazer since Urame. Let's talk about it. Instead of being thrown back to where we left off last time, with Maru's identity being exposed frame 1, we actually tail Usami, who is apparently the acting minister for foreign affairs, and his subordinate Mino as they meet with the diplomatic envoy of the Simurians as well as Maru's brother. What's interesting about this setup here is that the aliens basically have a monopoly on information, and it makes me wonder if we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on the will they, won't they aspect of it all. Let me explain. Basically, because the Simurian envoy, Japaloma, who is able to speak Japanese fluently, it implies that he actually has the capability of perfectly understanding human languages in general. Add on to that the fact that the US is not actually being 100% forthcoming with the Japanese government, and what you've got is a third party that could realistically play each side like a fiddle, kind of like Kenjaku did back in the original JJK. While Japan does have the monopoly of cursed energy, America is still America. So who's to stop them from making a deal with the Simurians, giving up Japan or even the rest of the world in exchange for their autonomy? Yep, check this guy out. He's actually on par with Sukuna. Okay, maybe not. Mino compares the guy to Sukuna, but from the comments that I've been seeing, it's just likely more so a weird wording rather than a literal translation. It's not that the horny guy is literally on par with Sukuna, but the whole potential alien invasion is, which lines up more closely with both what was said last chapter and then a bit of what is said later in the chapter. I personally don't care about this from a power scaling perspective, but I wouldn't like to see Sukuna or Gojo eclipsed from a story perspective. Keep in mind that what's been set up here is that sorcerers of this era have just been getting weaker and weaker as time has gone on. So if this guy does end up actually being Sukuna level, then not only is the earth cooked, but then the entire sort of structure is also cooked because everyone is just going to have to jump to Sukuna level somehow in terms of power, which just would not make sense and would kind of be ridiculous. Speaking of discount Sukuna, let's talk about him real quick. Alright, good talk. Again, being a bit cheeky, he does actually do nothing other than aura farm and make Usami and Mino shit themselves. Now don't get me wrong, the artist Iwasaki does a great job at making him look the part, but when that literally is all he does this chapter, there's not much else to say about him. I guess there's also this little thing we could talk about, which is, if you go back to Gege's original concept for JJK, we do see Sukuna possess Megumi instead of Yuji, and wait, what's that on his head? Is that horns? And what's on this guy's head? Yep, Sukuna was an alien, confirmed. Carry on. Thankfully for us, for now all they want is for Maru to be allowed free reign and for his identity to be kept secret. Which, yeah, they grant immediately. One little thing about Usami here, the way he puts his hand up kind of reminds me of the little doodle Gege did back in one of the final 2 volumes for what I'm assuming is the original Usami. Obviously it's not the same guy, but if it ends up being, Usami's descendant, it is a nice little detail. Regardless, Yuka and Tsurugi are left with keeping track of Maru, and our new shonen trio is officially together. Why is it always a trio in shonen? But first things first, Yuka and Tsurugi are making sure that Maru is actually an alien. Josh and Alon's kind of brought this up in the podcast, but it is pretty funny that the first thing that they jump to is alien for Maru when they see his third eye. Now, I know that Tsurugi just got done hearing about aliens from Discount Uzuki from Sakamoto days over here, but come on, you've seen sorcerers with less eyes, but never more. Did Mei's Crows just not record the fight between the rest of the gang and Sukuna? I mean, she could have sold it as Blu-rays after the fact, but this guy had never seen anyone with more eyes than 2? Whatever. These 2 are just kind of stupid, and it really reminds me of the goofiness that Nobara and Yuji would engage in back in JJK. But asking this guy about the aliens does prove to be a fruitful endeavor. I like how we got a shoehorn AI into this, like, whoa guys, it's the future, big fucking hologram phones and AI bro. Essentially the government is just stupid and incompetent, and there's already been leaks because of AI somehow, and that's how Uzuki here is able to tell them about the giant alien ship that's going to be making a supply run in Japan. They get their information and make their way to the Nagano prefecture to find out for real if these guys are actual aliens. It's during their walk that we see the next level glaze that I was talking about. Not Gojo, not Yuji, fucking Grandma and Grandpa were the ones to defeat Ryoma and Sukuna. Lil bro, are we for real? Like, Urame was petty when it came to the Sukuna glaze, but this guy is straight up delusional. The official release has them say Grandma and Grandpa, and the others, but come on. We all know that Megumi was the real MVP. I want to take this opportunity to do something I don't do often. I'm going to make a prediction. Some might even say a theory. Here's what's actually said in the chapter. Yuka wants to become Yuta, while Tsurugi wants to become Maki. Clear as day, right? Here's a thought I had sparked by this comment. In one post I made last week, this commenter right here brought up a really cool parallel that I want to talk about and even expand a little bit. What's happening here with Tsurugi receiving the ring, outside of just plot, is that he's being given a curse similar to how Yuta did back in Zero. Now keep in mind that the word curse in Jujutsu Kaisen is pretty fluid and loosely defined. It doesn't have to mean that he literally is cursed, like from a witch or something, but instead that he's now forced to carry the ring that he doesn't want to with him potentially forever. For Yuta, it was a similar deal. The ring was a gift from Rika, but after her passing, the ring was bound with her soul by Yuta and served as a source of pain and torment for his entire childhood up until he joined Jujutsu High. Tsurugi is in a similar boat, but rather than a literal curse that's stuffing his classmates into lockers, his possession of the ring has caused a rift between him and the person that he ought to be closest to, his sister Yuka. Yes, there's also the direct parallel to Maki being treated as weak, and that's also why he got given the ring in the first place, but let me cook, okay? Here's where Yuka and Maki come in more directly. What's happening to Yuka, by comparison, is kinda similar to what Maki went through when she was her age. The Gojo clan is taking away the ring that rightfully belongs to her, completely undermining her and Yuta's wishes. It's only improving herself by becoming as strong as Yuta that Yuka can ever hope to get it back, which, funnily enough, is very similar to what Maki wanted to do regarding the Zenin before, you know what happened there. Maki was constantly downplayed and disrespected her entire life, yet her goal during Season 1 was to become strong enough to one day show up at the door of the Zenin and claim her spot at the top, proving everyone they're wrong. So while Yuka seems to be way closer to her grandfather, her path to becoming like him might lead her to becoming more like Maki instead, or at least get her to appreciate and see her grandmother in a new light. The same can be said about Tsurugi. For Yuta, it wasn't so much so the goal to get rid of the ring, it was instead to free Rika's soul, but it's a similar setup. Yuka calls Tsurugi out for not being that close to his grandpa, so I can see a similar thing happening here where he gets to see his grandfather in a different light, seeing him the same way as his dear grandmother. I think it'd be a really cool setup, having these two siblings identify so strongly and wanting to be like their respective grandparent, only for them to end up becoming closer to the other one in the process. I gotta say, I really like the art in this section. Iwasaki has been pretty good since chapter 1, but I really like the way he renders light and dark. The spaceship coming into view and lighting up the Akotsu siblings is downright gorgeous, and the panel before that of the two of them walking on the ring is visually really cool. Yuka's on the inside while Tsurugi on the out. They're both walking their own path, but the ring is the one constant in both of their journeys. On the topic of siblings, we finally get to see Maru interact with his brother Cross. Like I said in my first chapter review, it was pretty obvious that the two of them would end up having pretty diametrically opposed views, and they also kind of share an interesting parallel with Yuka and Tsurugi. I'll get to that. Maru wants coexistence with the humans the most out of anything, whereas Cross is much more of a doomer. He's preparing for the worst of the worst should the negotiations fall through. It's entirely up to Maru to convince him that he's wrong and that the Earthlings and Cimmerians can actually live in harmony. The thing about the Akotsu siblings is that despite having their own goals, the end result is that Yuka gets her ring back, whereas for the Alien Bros, one end leads to either conflict with the humans or the other peace. Cross seems way more jaded than Maru, so both are heading down two different paths. It's going to be a lot easier for Yuka and Tsurugi to strengthen their relationship than for Maru and Cross to mend theirs. Look at this poor little guy. His brother doesn't even fucking want to have breakfast with him. How sad is that? Also, he actually does him so dirty. Like, I get that they kind of look alike, but did he have to sabotage the already non-existent rapport that his brother had with Tsurugi? It kind of makes me wonder if he's willing to get in Maru's way to basically ensure that the conflict 100% happens. The evil Sukuna-looking guy does not seem, like a peaceful type, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's sending people to kind of sabotage the relationships between the Cimmerians and humans to justify a giant invasion, which would be pretty crazy. And that's the end of chapter 2. Definitely a more densely packed one, but we're still in the setup phase. I imagine that the next chapter will feature a new mission that will really test the new gang. Maru's got some explaining to do, so I can see a lot of bickering similar to Yuji and Megumi in the detention center. And if Gege wants to cook up something as good as the detention center, I'll be seeing you next week.